Technology is the most powerful change in the world of education.
Everything changes.
Welcome to the Emerging Technologies in Education podcast, delivered to you by Clever Books Company.
Dear listeners, welcome to the Emerging Technologies in Education podcast series, and we have Nihal as the guest today. So how are you doing, Nihal?
I'm very well, thank you, Daria.
Thank you so much for being our guest, and it's my pleasure to talk to you. And I'm pretty much sure that this podcast is going to bring a lot of insightful information on technology and education. But first of all, let us get to know Nihal, and I want to give her a couple of words to introduce herself, tell which country she's coming from and what she's doing.
Brilliant, thank you, Daria. So my name's Nihal. I'm actually half Egyptian, half English, and was born in Swansea, Wales, so a bit of a mix. I started my career as a classroom teacher. I lasted for 1 year, after which I moved into the corporate world where I worked in telecoms for Nokia for several years based in North Africa. And then in 2010, I decided to make a bit of a career shift. I studied for an MBA and then moved into higher education, where my focus was very much around building and marketing and selling executive education programs. And then a few years ago, I fell into the wonderful world of education and education technology. And in parallel to that, I've been doing a lot of work with the Future of Work Research Consortium, which is very much around crowdsourcing solutions to the challenges of tomorrow's world of work. So I have a I'm very keen and have an avid interest in that how education system needs to evolve to ensure that young people are ready and equipped for the challenges of tomorrow's workplace. So that's me in a nutshell.
This is brilliant. I think it's a long kind of journey and touching different points. And I think thanks to that, you have a broad overview on how the education works, how technology works. And you're definitely, I feel that you're keen on technology. Can you tell me why you are for using technology in the classroom?
I think I always take a step back from that question, because I would say I'm for it when it's used in context and in line with a strategy. And that strategy cannot be developed in isolation, but within the broader context of the question, how do we as an educational institution, or what do we need to do in order to best prepare our young people for the future of work? A future that will bring a lot of uncertainty and need to be agile, to be creative, to problem solve. So what do we need to do, and what tools can I use in order to achieve this objective? Far too often we find that there's technologies that are being used very tactically with no real purpose. So they have a short lifespan, that they use a few times in the classroom, and then that's that. Where you start to see the real magic happen when using technologies, when all of these questions are asked and considered, and we've asked the question of why are we using this and how are we going to use it in the most effective way. And then to underpin all of that, making sure that the teachers in the classroom and the students receive the right training and support in order to be able to implement those successfully.
Sounds interesting. And so if we go a little bit into the direction, because I know where you're coming from, but if we go a little bit in the direction what you currently do, is it connected with using technology for education, and how?
So I'm currently managing the marketing and business development at an education technology startup called Harness. We have a content delivery and formative assessment tool. The conversations we have with teachers, or the initial conversations, are never really around, how you can use a particular feature, but rather we look at co-creating new pedagogical experiences of engagement and participation using the tool. And the tool is a simple proposition. You create a lesson using your existing resources, create an interactive lesson using existing resources, and you share that with students via a browser. So it's device and content agnostic. But then the key bit is that teachers have a real-time insight into every student's understanding during the lesson. So they can see how each student is progressing through their work. They have an overview of the whole class, and there's a number of assessment and analytics tools to give teachers instant feedback on how students are performing, so they can very quickly intervene and give one-to-one support to the students who need it most.
This sounds like a really helpful tool and really interactive, and really brings value to the educators that try to provide that and try to use this tool in the classroom. So when you are talking about using this tool and you're meeting the people using this tool for the educational purposes, do you communicate them the features or the value they can bring the students? What actually works better for the educators in that sense?
It's my big thing is always work hand in hand with the individuals who are using your platform, and in this case it's teachers and students. So we constantly work. I mean, every single day I'm speaking to teachers who are using the platform and who aren't using the platform to get their feedback as well, but to look at to get the insights from their side. How are they using it in the classroom, and what value are they seeing from implementing it? So, for example, we have teachers who are using it to encourage students to take ownership over their learning. We have teachers who are using it to develop higher order thinking skills, such as critical thinking and problem solving. We have teachers using it to increase student engagement and reduce low-level disruption in the classroom. So that we don't dictate how they should use it. What we do, and I find this works very well, is we work with teachers, we look at where are the pockets of best practice, and then we provide a platform to share and spread that best practice amongst other teachers.
This looks like really good and practical approach, and I really like that best practice is the key of how to use the technology in education. And if we are coming back to the emerging technologies in education, there are a lot of them coming up, and I want to hear your personal opinion on which ones do you think have the future, and which ones do you think are beneficial for the use at school? And I'm talking about like maybe mixed reality, maybe 3D printing, MOOCs, and solution like yours as well.
I think that there are so many, Daria, and I think maybe that's part of the challenge. So one great example of how gaming can be used effectively is if you look at the work that MIT is doing. They've developed a game that enables people to learn languages. I think it's called Xenos. And the research they did looking at the impact of using that game was that 10 weeks of gameplay actually gave significantly higher gains than what was seen with 10 weeks of classroom instruction. Not to say that the classroom instruction should be replaced by the gaming. Ideally, you want to be doing both at once. So there's lots of great things happening around gaming and how it can be used to enhance learning, and particularly around problem-solving skills and critical thinking. I think the role of the educator is often making that connection clear to students, because children don't always see the connection in terms of the inventions that they're creating with a game environment, or the problems that they're solving, and how those tie into real-world problems. So that's where I think that the teacher really becomes, the role as a facilitator becomes really, really important.
I do agree in terms of role of facilitator as the important part of the whole educational process. And I wanted to ask you another question. It's connected to gaming. And recently, I was talking to one of the teachers, and they were saying that one of the key elements of the generally of the educational process is the personalized approach to learning.
Yes.
Gamification is kind of the way of personalized learning?
I think there's lots of ways of personalizing learning, and I think it is one way. I think people learn in different ways. The interesting thing I found about the research that MIT have been doing is that a lot of the time that the children who wouldn't necessarily engage during your average lesson were much more likely to engage through the game. So I think before thinking about personalization, I think about participation and engagement. But definitely gaming is one way. I think it goes back to that question of why are we using a particular game? What's the context? What are the skills I'm trying to get my students to learn through playing this game? As those being the initial questions. The tool that we build at Harness is very much around personalizing learning, because teachers can see the students work as they progress through it, and they can, using the assessment and analytics tools, they can see who is struggling and who isn't, so they can intervene and give that one-to-one support, and even differentiate in terms of the content, to make sure that each student is on a relevant pathway, essentially.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I like the personalized approach to learning, because everybody's so different and have different skills. And I think by making the education process standard, we are eliminating those already, pre-existing talents that kids have. So that's really appreciate your point of view on that. And
yeah, Daria, let me just add something to that, because I think you raise a really important point, that there will, especially when you think about the time in the UK in particular, where there's a lot of time pressure on teachers, where class sizes are fairly large. How do you manage to ensure that you are being inclusive of all students, and inclusivity not just from a diversity perspective in terms of gender and background and so forth, but in terms of how young people learn. We all learn in different ways, and a really good example of that was, I was always very academic when I was at school, but my sister was really creative, and the education system didn't cater to that. So she often got very poor grades, and I got very high grades. Yet she has set up 2 businesses around, very much around the creative industries, and done well. Whereas I would find that sort of work very, very challenging. So she was marginalized by the education system, and this wasn't in the UK. This was abroad. So I think, and this is where technology can play a really important role, because it can make the classroom management process a little bit more efficient sometimes. If you give the tools to the teacher to be able to easily differentiate not just the content but the learning environment as well, that can be very powerful.
I really love the example of your sister, and it's pretty much about myself as well. When you are going through the standard program, some kids fit into this and some kids don't. So I never was fitting into that program of the standard learning process, and the point there was that I didn't get why my personal point of view on some subjects like biology or chemistry or physics was not accepted by the teacher, and the grades were, or even the creative writing, and it was not accepted, and I was graded for my personal opinion. I couldn't get it all the time. Why my personal opinion is poorly graded because it didn't fit into the framework of how it's supposed to be after reading a book or anything of that kind. So I think that personalized learning is actually the key, and technology is the path to that. Last question I have to you. So me and you, we are pro-technology in education. That's a clear point. If you, for example, meet tomorrow a person who says, I don't want to use technology in the classroom, I think it's absolutely not necessary, what do you normally tell those people, and do you encourage them to change their mind?
We get that quite a lot, where we'll have conversations with teachers who will just say flat out, I'm not interested in using technology in my classroom. And when you dig a bit deeper, and I think the key is actually really listening and asking the right questions, you often find it's because, they don't see the value in using it, or they've tried and they've been burnt. And what I mean by that is that either the tech didn't work. I mean, imagine, managing a classroom of 10, not so well behaved, a class of not so well behaved year 10 students, and then you try use a piece of software in your class and it just doesn't work. that's that can be perceived on your own part as you failed, for that lesson. That they haven't received the right support from either the company that sold the platform in terms of the training and development, or they haven't received the right support from the senior leadership team at the school, or the school just doesn't have the right infrastructure. So if you don't have good Wi-Fi and you've got a tool that's a cloud-based, browser-based platform, how are you going to even use it? So understanding first and foremost, what is their ambition? One of the first questions I'll ask the teacher is nothing to do with technology. What is your ambition for your students? What are you trying to achieve with them? And then I'll go on to ask them questions about where are the challenges now? Because everyone faces obstacles when they're trying to reach a particular end goal, right? And then we start to work together. Once you listen and they open up a little bit to explore whether or not there is an opportunity to use a particular tool to address one of those challenges. Now, I think one of the key things, and I cannot stress this enough, Daria, is that as someone working with an education technology company, my role is to market and sell our platform. However, if I'm speaking with a teacher or a school and I feel that there isn't a need for our particular tool, then I will say, you know what, I actually don't think this is right for you. Because at the end of the day, we need to remember that pushing a tool onto a school or into a classroom that's not right for that classroom is detrimental to the students. It's detrimental to the teachers, and it's a distraction. It's just plain wrong, I think. So I think being able to genuinely listen and only suggest where you see there is true value. The other thing I often do when I'm speaking to a teacher is say, well, if they seem to be opening up, and I do think that there is a genuine need, or they could really benefit from the platform, I will say to them, let me put you in touch with one of the other teachers that we're working with, and listen to how they're using it, and then make a decision.
It makes sense. Referencing to those who use technology or use some specific tool and it works for them, maybe sharing the experience is one of the best ways to get those peer-to-peer recommendations and pushing to use something. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I think this podcast is so knowledgeable. We're going to share all the links and some additional links that Neha is going to send us. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being online today, and have a great day.
Thank you, Daria.
Everything changes.